Let me start off by welcoming everyone here. Thank you so much for taking time to join us today and learn a little bit more about Microsoft Teams. We are thrilled to have our panelists with us, whom I will introduce in just a moment. But let me just take care of a couple of housekeeping details. I imagine everybody's probably getting accustomed to the fact of joining these sessions as webinar attendees, which means you don't necessarily have a video or audio control. However, we do have the ability to chat, and we do have the ability to manage your questions through the Q&A feature. So what I'd like to do is encourage you to interact throughout the session. If you have questions, comments, or whatnot, please feel free to use Q&A or chat. Also, know that we'll follow up today's sessions, as we have every week, with links to resources for materials and videos, links, whatnot that we mentioned today. We'll provide those to you after the fact. With that, let me introduce our guests today who have volunteered to spend their time with us, and we certainly do appreciate it. TJ Felice from Centric Consulting and his colleague Joe Hartzell are coming to join us and let us know a little bit more about some of the things that we can do to help increase our uptake using Teams. You know, most of us have been thrust into this really without planning to do this. So their advice is going to be useful for us in terms of just making this a better experience. With that, let me turn things over to TJ. If you don't mind introducing yourself, say a quick sentence or so, and we'll let Joe do the same, and then we'll get underway with our content. TJ.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jennifer. So my name is TJ Felice. It's a great pleasure to be with you all here today. I'm based here in Charlotte, North Carolina, as are many of you. I'm responsible for leading Centric's Charlotte business unit. Centric is a 20-year-old management and IT consulting firm. We've got about 1,000 employees in 12 locations across the US and a software development center in India. Over those 20 years, we've built a number of areas where we have some really deep expertise. And one of those areas is in the enterprise collaboration area. And this is where I will seamlessly pass the baton to Joe, who's one of our leaders of enterprise collaboration, and let him give a quick introduction. Joe.
Thanks, TJ. So I hope everyone can hear me okay. So as TJ said, my name is Joe Hartzell. I'm coming to you from sunny but cold central Ohio today, which is where I reside. And I'm glad to be with all of you. And as TJ said, that I lead what we call our enterprise collaboration team here at Centric, which really means that we've formed a group of people. There's about 20 of us nationally that focus on the Microsoft Modern Workplace, which includes things like Office 365 and primarily things like Teams. And so happy to be with you today. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to join you.
Thanks so much for that intro, guys. So as I mentioned, what we really want to talk about is what are some of the strategies we can use to sort of increase our uptake with Microsoft Teams. With that, TJ, maybe you could share your screen and when you're ready to, and let's jump right into the content and sort of get down to brass tacks and let folks know the framework of what we're discussing here.
Absolutely. I'm going to just go ahead and share this in regular PowerPoint mode instead of wrestling with the whole presenter mode. It looks like it says host is disabled screen sharing for me.
Well, that doesn't work very well, does it?
It's not an unwise guideline. Joe will tell you I can be technically inept, so.
Okay, well, I tell you what we'll do. Let's do this a little bit differently. I've got it right here. I'm not seeing that you're disabled. Whoops. I'm not seeing that you're disabled, but I'll launch it and share my screen. How's that?
That will work great.
All right.
As you're doing that, Jennifer, if you don't mind, I'd like to encourage the group to ask questions throughout our presentation. Joe has an extensive knowledge of this space, so if he's going too quickly or covering things that you might have missed, please ask us. We're happy to revisit those things. My perspective, just so you know, is more from the end user take. I'm responsible for ensuring my business unit and the 20 or so people under my leadership effectively use Teams. So a lot of the adoption issues that you are perhaps experiencing are things that I've already had to wrestle with. So I think between the two of us, Joe will be really insightful in giving you some great fundamentals and things to make sure you do first, second, and third. And again, I'm here to help answer any questions or talk about particular challenges you may have in using it day in and day out. Sound good? So here are the things we thought we'd cover today. As I mentioned, Joe's going to cover the first few items because they're really important to get right. So you want Joe talking to you about those things to consider up front. And then as we move on through the deck, we're going to get to things like communication tips and tricks, where I think both of us will be able to share some valuable experiences we've had, both internally at our firm, as well as all the clients Joe has helped successfully implement and deploy Microsoft Teams. Joe, do you want to take this one?
Yes. So I always like to start these meetings, and they're great meetings like this, and they're great when we can do them in person because I ask people to raise their hands. We don't really have that ability today, but if you're not familiar with Microsoft Teams, we like this tagline of Teams is the hub for teamwork in Office 365 or Microsoft 365, and so, I'm sorry, I'm seeing that we do have the ability to raise our hands here on Zoom. So that would be great if, so here's what I'd like to ask is, so I'm sorry, I'm not very Zoom literate. We use Teams at Centric. If we could, just either through a quick raise of hands or through the chat feature, you know, how many people are sharing or currently using Microsoft Teams today in your organization. And it looks like we've got about 45 people in the meeting today. And so be curious to see what that number looks like. And as that information is coming in, you know, as I was saying, we like to call Teams the hub for teamwork, not really just for Microsoft 365, but the hub for teamwork in your organization. Okay, the reason for that is because of the capabilities it provides, which start at the most basic level with the ability for people to chat, whether that is one-on-one chat or whether that's chat within a group of people. It provides the ability to have meetings, whether those meetings are similar to what we're doing today here on Zoom, or whether that's simply a conference call. It does provide calling and voice capabilities, and there's licensing plans that support that if you're looking for a phone system. And then there's a lot of apps that are built into Teams and that you can connect to from Teams that allow you to make it more functional to do the things that your organization is looking at doing from a communication and collaboration perspective. Okay, let's see. Okay, how are we doing on the poll? Okay. Okay. I don't have access to that info, I guess, so we're going to keep going. Okay, so let's jump ahead to the next slide. Okay, so one of the questions that we frequently get is, well, how do I know if I own Teams or how do I get Teams? And that question has been greatly simplified from Microsoft in that Teams is now part of all Office 365 and Microsoft 365 plans. Okay, that spans small business, enterprise, education. There's even some developer plans out there. But what we wanted to focus on today is talking about what is available primarily for nonprofit organizations. And so if your organization is smaller than 300 users, typically you fit into what's called a small business plan with Microsoft. Teams is included in Office 365 Business, Office 365 Premium. And the biggest difference between those two is with business, you use Office through your browser, so Office Online. With Office 365 Premium, you actually get Microsoft Office that you can install on your employees or users' PCs. Now, Microsoft offers some pretty attractive pricing for these. So if you're happy with using Business Premium and just using Word, Excel, PowerPoint through your browser, they just, and you're below 300 users, they just simply ask for a donation to support that. If you want to go to Office Premium, 365 Premium, where you actually get, like I said, Microsoft Office, the cost to you is $3 per user per month. And while in some of their commercial plans, that is sort of negotiable based on how many licenses you buy. For nonprofits, that's a pretty set price. And so you can count on that $3 per user per month price, okay? Now, if you're an organization that's larger than 300 users, you would be looking at what they call their enterprise plans. And there are primarily 3 of those available, E1, E3, and E5. And with the E1 plan, think of it as being very similar to Office 365 Business. With the E1 plan, you are essentially going to be using Microsoft Office through your browser. And again, for up to 2,000 users, you can get that simply for a donation to Microsoft. If you step up to the E3 plan that includes that Office client, there's no limit on the number of users, and that will be $4.50 per user per month. And then the big step up there is the E5 plan. If you remember from the previous slide, I mentioned that Teams could also be your voice or your phone system, and that's included in the E5 plan, and that ramps up to $14.50 per user per month, okay? Now, one of the questions that we've gotten a lot here in this past, month or so, TJ, since this whole COVID-19 thing started is, well, our organization doesn't have Office 365 or Teams today. How can we get started with it? And I guess I just simply forgot to put that on this slide, is that there is actually a free trial program available right now where you can get a free trial of of Office 365. It's the E1 plan, okay? You can get that for up to 6 months at no cost from Microsoft, and that would even include passing on the donation. One of the things that we do as a Microsoft partner is we offer a couple of days of startup support to help get you started there, primarily focused on how can you get started using Teams, okay? So there are lots of options out there if you don't have Office 365 today, but you do want to start using Teams. Lots of options out there, and we're more than happy to help you sort through those if you need help, okay? Okay. So that looks like we don't have any questions right now about licensing. That's good. So let's jump forward. And the other question we get is, okay, so we now have Teams and we now have Office 365. How do we get started? And there are really 3 key factors to getting started with Teams. One is around the technical aspects or being technically ready for it. One is around the adoption tactics or adoption readiness. And the other one is just around organizational acceptance, okay? So, what we have found, excuse me, what we have found is we've worked with, probably well over 100 clients now on Teams deployments, and we use it ourselves, as TJ mentioned. We've been using it here at Centric for the past couple of years, is we want to make sure the organization is ready before we start rolling it out. Because if we don't do that, what we end up with is some confused people about what they can and can't do, how they do what they want to do, and really just how Teams fits with other things they have in the organization. And so what we recommend strongly is that we spend a little time up front on planning. And so what are all, so for instance, if you look at those technical aspects, our focus here is, what are all of those things that that IT support team needs to know before they roll teams out to the organization? And that can be things around configuration. We put a strong emphasis on governance, making sure that you have a plan for how you're going to use Teams, and actually maybe some of the things that Teams won't be used for within your organization, right? And it's really about getting that IT team ready, however large or small that might be, and making sure that they're prepared so that when they do start rolling teams out through the organization, that they're able to support the users. And in the past month here, as we've all started working much more in a remote manner, that's become even more critical, because support maybe isn't as easy as it used to be, where you could walk to somebody's desk if they needed help. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
John, if I might just interject.
Please.
And say, you know, I think that's part of the challenge maybe that a lot of us are facing now. You know, we didn't have the luxury of advanced planning, right?
Exactly.
A stay-at-home order was issued, and so now it's kind of like a ready, fire, aim situation, you know, for many folks. And so I think, you know, how we can help people figure out, well, if you didn't get the advanced planning done first, here are some things we can do, like in the midst of what we're grappling with, to help sort of increase our uptake.
You know what, that's a great point and a great question. And so we have had to address this very topic multiple times in the past month, and I mean for well over a dozen customers, right? And I'll give you an example. We have a food products manufacturing company up in the Boston area that told us, hey, we need to get Teams rolled out to 1,800 people, and we need to do it now, right? The one thing that we cautioned them on is deploying the Teams client out to people's PCs is not hard. It's not hard at all. But unless IT is really ready to take on support of that, then you're going to run into, again, frustrated users and the like. So what we've done is we've come up with what we call a rapid startup, right? So you know what, we realize right now we don't have time to do all of the advanced planning that we'd like to do. So let's focus on just those items that are most critical to IT to be able to support their users getting on board with Teams, and really focusing that down to just a day or two's worth of work. And what we found is that investment of a couple of days really, really, really helps from a standpoint of helping the users get on board and be functional. Okay, but that's a great point. Yeah, you don't have time for that advanced planning that you'd love to do in this case, right? The other important aspect that we look at, we mentioned it already, is around adoption. And again, this has kind of changed in some ways from how we would normally do this, right? Normally we would plan out, we've got this nice communication campaign that we're going to run, where we're going to tell people what's going to be happening and when, and then we've offered training classes and all sorts of things. Well, in the current environment we're in, we may not have a lot of time to do that. And so, but the thing that we need to make sure that we do is that we still help our employees, because if we roll out something new and they become even less functional than this new working arrangement would make them normally, that's going to hurt productivity, it's going to hurt efficiency, and it's going to cause a lot of frustration. And so, again, it's very critical, what we found, to spend a little bit of time helping your users get accustomed to the Teams experience. And that can be done through what we have found is to be very effective is once you have that expert or two in your IT group, and that expert might be 2 days worth of expertise, but once you have that person, just start scheduling some online training sessions, in online Q&A sessions, and take advantage of some of the adoption collateral and material that's out there. And I provided a link at the bottom of this slide, and you're going to get the slides from today's meeting. The Microsoft Teams Adoption Guide has some fantastic references that you can use, that you can share with your user community, your employees, and that includes a link to something called the Teams Quick Start Guide, which is a very visual guide that walks people through the Teams interface. But really making sure that people at least have some exposure and some direction and guidance, and the ability to ask questions about Teams is a really important way to start driving that adoption, so they feel like they're functional, and that can be something that they can use productively. Okay.
Yeah.
TJ, I was going to say, TJ, yeah, looking at that from the perspective that we went through, TJ, anything to add there?
Yeah, just to complement what you said, Joe, there is a wealth of information out there, and part of the challenge is there's too much, and it's hard to digest it and figure out, where do I start? So I'd encourage you guys, under the adoption tactics, we call out, start with 1 or 2 initiatives. That's a fancy way of saying, think about your business, how you serve your clients, your customers, your community members, and what are the challenges you're trying to overcome? Is it chat? Is it communicating in small groups? Is it sharing files? What are the areas where you think Teams is going to be impactful for you? And start with 1 or 2 of those use cases, and use those as the initiatives Joe mentioned to run practice sessions, get together as groups, experiment, peruse best practices out on the web, apply Teams to solve the problem in a way that makes the most sense for you. One of the great powerful things about Teams is that you can do a lot of different things in a lot of different ways, but that also makes adoption a little bit challenging, right? So that practicing and that experimenting is probably one of the best ways to figure out what approach is going to work best for you and your group.
And let me just add to that what both of you gentlemen said. Guys, part of the resources that we'll give you access to this afternoon, or rather in about 24 hours, there's a link to a site that talks about how nonprofits specifically can leverage Teams to address productivity. So, we're crossing a couple of arenas here, the corporate arena in an enterprise versus nonprofit. And I think it's important to keep that in mind when you're perusing the internet for resources, because just like TJ said, there's so much. You can get analysis paralysis in a big hurry. So definitely. I think it's useful to have a look at perhaps, perspectives that bring all this wonderful stuff down into a framework that's meaningful for your business. I think that was a great way to put it, TJ. Think about your business. So anyway, know that one of the resources we'll talk about using Teams specifically in the nonprofit space.
Great, thank you. And finally is, as you drive that adoption, you go through those adoption activities that TJ mentioned, and we encourage, like the first item we have up there, building some champions in the organization, so it's not all on IT. But as you go through those adoption activities, really understanding how your business needs to use Teams, and how to align it to what your employees are trying to do. And again, that's a little different today, maybe than it was a month or a month and a half ago, right? So provide a feedback mechanism. And what I mean by that is maybe have one team for your whole organization, and there's a limit of up to 5,000. have a team for your organization where people can exchange ideas on how they're using Teams, where they can ask questions, and maybe it's not all on IT to answer those questions, right? Maybe your champions can help out there. So having that feedback mechanism in place through Teams is a great idea. And yet steer people towards Teams chat instead of email. And the reason we say that is because as we work with our customers, one of the first things we always hear is, well, email is our only method of communication, and I get too many emails, right? And so what happens is people ignore the emails, especially the ones that come from the, I would say, more corporate or generic sources. They just tend to overlook those. And so leverage Teams as that way to have a conversation with somebody so that you don't have that whole string of reply all emails anymore. And that's actually one of the biggest changes we've seen at Centric is the ability for people like TJ and I just to simply have a conversation as opposed to a whole string of emails. And then finally, it's just very important to try to schedule time for groups to get together, whether that is a group conversation, whether that's a meeting, however you want to do it, where they can share, as I mentioned before, share problems they're having, share tips that would help others with the use of Teams. And that's great through open forum meetings. So we've got one of our customers that we work with every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 or 10 a.m. It's 1 hour open forum meeting on Teams where anyone can get on and ask questions. And we found those to be really powerful and really helpful because what they found is a lot of people will jump in the meeting not to ask questions, just to hear the questions and listen to the answers. And they learn a lot from that. And that's also where you could leverage your champions greatly because they can sometimes give real examples of how Teams is being used within their own business unit. So whether that's HR or legal and compliance or whatever that might be. And so it's a great way to continue to drive acceptance and use through the organization.
Hey, Joe, to speak to what you just said about, real examples of using Teams and pros and cons, we had a question come in from the audience that says, my office uses Teams. Can you share best practices for when to send out an email to one or several teammates and when to use chat in Teams?
Yep. TJ, you want to take that one?
I'll jump on it first and then Joe can correct me. So I use it in just the way Joe articulated. When it's a collaborative kind of exchange, when it's basically a virtual dialogue where there's give and take. For example, Joe and I were on chat this morning preparing for this webinar. We were reviewing the PowerPoint, we were exchanging ideas, we were making sure we had all the logistics ready. That was a virtual chat. Could we have had it over email? We could have, but it's clunky and it's slow and it's not nearly as effective as Microsoft Teams is for that kind of two-way exchange. We use email for things now like task follow-up, where there's not really a dialogue, right? Hey, this piece of information needs to be updated in our core system. Would you mind doing that? I'll send an email for that because I don't need a reply. So, that's one example where regardless of whether it's one-to-one or one-to-many, recognizing that Teams supports a more collaborative discussion. And I think of email much more as a one-way communication tool now.
And that is exactly the approach that we've taken here at Centric is, think of email as more of communication out. And when I really need to interact with someone, that's a great opportunity to use Teams for that communication. I hope that answers the question. If not, we're happy to follow up.
I think so. I think that's great. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. I think Joe and I were going to tag team this one. I'm going to give Joe a break because he's been sharing a lot of information. So I'll try to tackle this one on tips and tricks. So one of the areas where we wanted to spend a fair amount of time making sure people were comfortable is on the chat feature. So, this is real-time chat with one-to-one or one-to-many capabilities. And it's as simple as entering the names of the recipients or the people you want to begin a chat with. The great thing about the chats are that they don't go away. They remain out there, so you can search them. This is great for tasks that happen periodically. If, for example, you're doing something once a week, we have a number of meetings internally here in my business unit where we do things once a week. We'll just pick up that chat line every week and pick up where we left off. So it keeps the history intact. It shows us what we talked about last week and what things we have to revisit this week. So it's a really convenient way to kind of create an organic audit trail and remind us of where we left things last week, and again, just continue to build on going forward. There's a couple of very quick shortcut keys that we've used here. One of the things that we'll get into here shortly is around notifications. Teams offers a pretty heavy notification feature, which means whenever someone contributes to a chat or a team that you are a member of, the default setting is that you'll get a little box pop up on your screen to say, hey, this contribution has been made. You can mute that by changing that setting, and a lot of people do that. So in order to make sure that people are notified when you would like them to be notified, that @ symbol feature is a great way to call people out. So if I'm working on a team of 5 or 6 people, for example, and I make a post or a contribution to the chat, and it really just pertains to Joe, for example, I can put that @ symbol and then type in Joe Hartzell and type my comment after that. And then Joe will receive a special notification, if you will, that says, hey, TJ mentioned you in this chat. You might want to go check it out. So that is a really nice way to identify specific team members. And that's a really useful tool if you have some fairly large team sizes. So let me pause there and see if Joe has anything he'd like to add.
The only thing I'll add to that, TJ, is that because your users would be already in your directory, your employees, right? They'd be within your Office 365 tenant. As soon as you type that @ symbol, it's going to start previewing for you who those people are that you can add to. So for instance, if you're in a chat with maybe 6 or 7 other people, the first thing it's going to do when you type that @ symbol is only show you those 6 or 7 people in that chat. And then as you start typing, it's going to narrow those down to who you want to chat with. And so that's a nice feature. But you also have the ability, let's say you do have 6 or 7 people in a conversation and you say, hey, you know what? I now need to bring Charlie into this conversation because he needs to be he really would have some contribution to this. You can always add more people to a conversation and you can choose, I want to have Charlie see all the history of what we've been discussing, or I don't really want him to see that, but we want to have him part of the conversation from this point forward. So you have that choice also. And so it's Teams provide you with a great way to bring others into the conversation as you progress through whatever the topic is.
Awesome. Great ads, Joe. Thank you.
Question, TJ and Joe. So, when you talk about using the @ symbol and chatting with people, I know you did mention, you were a second ago, people within your tenant. Let's put that in more concrete, pragmatic terms. Okay.
Okay.
If I'm trying to chat with somebody on Teams, and they live in a different building under a different organization, can I do it? Will it look the same as when I'm chatting with someone on my own team in my organization?
Okay. TJ, do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, I know there's a security piece to it, Joe, so why don't you talk about that first?
So the answer is yes, but.
Yeah.
So one of the capabilities that you have with Teams is the ability to allow guests to join your team, okay, and have conversations with them. However, within Teams administration, your IT group needs to allow guest access to Teams in order for that to happen. So let me give you an example. We work very closely with a lot of different folks at Microsoft, and we allow Microsoft as guests to join our teams, right? And so I have conversations with many people from Microsoft throughout the course of a day, and the only difference is that when I start a conversation with that person or add them to a conversation, they have the word guest in parentheses next to their name, okay? You can also add them to your teams, so where you have your files and where you're having group conversations and the like, and your teams and channels. By doing that, they're restricted just to the team that you add them to, but please be aware that they'll be able to see everything within that team, not just perhaps the one channel that you wanted them to be part of. And so that's part of that governance that we talked about earlier on, putting some governance in place around teams. But yes, guest access is definitely supported if your IT team has allowed that function to be enabled within your Office 365 tenant. Okay?
So the takeaway there, guys, if some of that language is curling your hair, talking about teams and channels and this and that, reach out to us at Aparo. We're working with folks right now to help define, well, what is a team anyway? And what are these things called channels? And where does all my stuff get saved? So we can help you with all that stuff. This is not the right forum to delve in that deeply. But if you have those questions and they're floating around in your head, please know after the fact, come back around to Aparo and we'll help you with those things. We'll connect you with volunteers or trainers or whatever you need. But I do want to circle back around and make sure that we answer a question that was just raised relative to adding guests to your team. And the question is this: if you can add people, then you can also take them off when they no longer need to be there, right?
So good question. So if that is within a team or a channel, you can always remove that person, okay? If I just spin up a chat with TJ and let's say 2 other people, right? And it's just the ability for us to share information. And I decide suddenly again that I don't want Charlie to be part of that conversation anymore. I can't remove him from that conversation, but I could start a new conversation just with the other 2 people that I want to chat with.
Exactly.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep. Great question, though. That's a really good one. It looks like we're getting other questions. I'll try to cover the calendar call stuff pretty quickly to make sure we get to some of these other questions, which are a little more technical. But I definitely wanted to talk about the calendar and the call feature in Teams, because this is what most of us are using Teams for today, right? And that's spinning up conference calls or video calls. And I will tell you that even though Teams offers some fantastically powerful integration with Microsoft Outlook, the kind of fundamental or immediate functionality you need to spin up a call can be done completely within Teams. And I'd encourage you to go that route first, because it's the most straightforward, it's the most simple way to schedule a call with a video link with a URL, as well as with a dial-in number. And you can do that by simply clicking on the little calendar icon that's on the left-hand side of your Teams window, and it will walk you through a very easy-to-use wizard to schedule your call and invite people. I'll kind of pause there and see if Joe has anything to add. I do want to touch on mobile at some point here, because there's definitely some good and some bad things you need to be aware of. But first, I want to make sure I've covered the fundamentals.
Yeah, so TJ, thank you. There's 2 things I'd like to point out in regards to calendars and Teams. One is if your organization has already moved their email to Office 365, then that calendar you see in Teams is exactly the same calendar you see in Outlook. It's no different. Well, it looks a little different because it's purple for one. But anyhow, it does look a little different, but it is the same calendar information. Now, if you say, well, my organization hasn't made the move to exchange to Office 365 yet for our email, couple of options there. One is if you're not on a Microsoft email platform at all, you would need to get on a Microsoft email platform in order to have that calendar capabilities. But if your email is still sitting on a Microsoft Exchange server in your data center or your hosted data center, there's something that can be done called a hybrid configuration. And that is adding a link, essentially, from your Exchange server to Office 365. And with that, you would be able to see that calendar information, that one calendar, regardless of whether you're in Teams or Outlook. So there might be a little bit of technical work on the back end to make that happen for you. But the best part is once you get your email to Office 365, that calendar feature is seamless across both Outlook and Teams.
Great.
That's great.
Okay.
And again, guest access here is fully supported, slightly different than the chat and the Teams functionality we talked about earlier. You can invite anyone to a Teams video call or to a Teams conference call simply by adding their email address in the invitation.
That's one thing, guys, in the community that we've been working with Teams here at Aparo in a pretty prolific manner here recently, where we're inviting people outside of our Office 365 tenant, our installation, to come into a meeting for a conversation or whatever. And it's so easy. We just paste the link in the message to them and send it. And then all they have to do is click the link and they're in. And what I mean is they're in the call, or as we're either video or audio. They're not in our Teams, but we're able to meet with them on the fly that easily. It's really neat.
And Tia, do you want to talk about mobile a little bit? Because that's, as you put there, there's both good and there's a little bit of bad there.
There is. So the good is that the mobile interface, at least on an iPhone, that's what I use. I can't really speak to Android, but anecdotally, I've heard it's just as powerful an experience. Microsoft has done a phenomenal job of making it very easy to interact, even on a video call on your mobile device. You simply click the same link that is sent out, the same link you would click on your computer. You click on your phone, it takes care of getting you into the meeting, and the camera on your phone can be used for video access. It is a fantastically easy UI. If we're sharing screens like we're doing now in Zoom, that functionality works just as seamlessly on your phone. It's a very powerful tool. The bad is that, at least again with my provider, you are incurring data charges when you use it. So it is not against the cellular network, it's actually against your data cap. So you do have to be mindful of that if you plan to use your mobile device. There could be data charges based on your phone plan that you could easily bump up against if you're using your mobile feature.
Yep. Now, there is a way to avoid that. So we warn all of our customers about this because it has surprised a couple of them. There's something in Teams called the audio conferencing add-in. It is an addition. I will be very frank with you, but your price will be incredibly low. Probably in the neighborhood of 50 cents per user per month or something like that. But what the audio conferencing add-in does is it allows you to have a conference call number in all of your meetings. So whether you're an employee coming in from outside the network and you just have maybe a bad connection, or whether you're a guest, you can click on that number to join the meeting instead of the Teams link itself. And the advantages of clicking on that number is you're using your cell minutes, not your data plan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Interesting. So that's a purchasable add-on. Is that what I understood you said?
It is called the audio conferencing add-in.
Okay. Is there such a thing built into any of the licenses, the O365 licenses, or is that always something you have to purchase?
That is always something you have to purchase.
Okay.
Yep.
And is that per user, Joe?
Yeah, and so the list price of that for commercial customers, that's important to know. For commercial customers is about $4 per user per month. So for instance, here at Centric, we're up to about 300 or 400 users on the audio conferencing add-ins. We're paying a little less than that because of our volume. But for nonprofit organizations, and if we have time before we get off this call, I can look that up for you, actually, for those who are interested. But for nonprofits, that's going to be dramatically less expensive.
Yeah, if we don't get to that today in this call, then I'll connect with you and make sure that we include it in our resources after the fact.
Got it. Okay.
I would like to get to a couple of the questions that have been raised. I'm just mindful of the time. We're at 12:44, so we still have plenty of time, but I want to make sure we give folks an opportunity to get some answers to some questions. I thought this was really interesting because it goes back to something, I can't remember if TJ or Joe said it, or one of you guys said, just consider having just your one main team as opposed to creating lots of different teams. Here's a question that applies to that. How do I use teams to organize various aspects of a project? We have teams with channels, and under the teams, we have members. Is there another way to overlay an additional hierarchy? I'm sorry, you hear the dog. Amazon is here. Sorry.
Yeah. So I can answer that. Yes, it does, and I can answer that. So using teams as a way to manage or organize projects is a very, very common use. We see it a lot. We do it here at Centric even. And now, the specific answer to your question is no, there's no additional hierarchy you can layer into teams. It is a team is the highest level. You can have channels within a team, and you can have tabs within a channel. And those tabs could be anything from different file stores, could be a OneNote notebook, for instance, for that project or whatever it is. And there's even a new feature, a relatively new feature called private channels, but that doesn't really give you a layer, an additional layer of hierarchy there. So every organization is different, but one of the most common things that we see across a lot of our customers is that for project use, they first of all come up with some way to name their projects in a standard manner so that they're easily identifiable. And then you would have a team is your project, and the various aspects of that project could be channels within that team. The other concept that we see quite frequently is where you might have a departmental or organizational breakdown, and you say, okay, I'm going to have a team for all of the IT projects, and each of those projects within that IT projects team would be a separate channel, and then you store all of that collateral or content for those projects within that channel and the various tabs that you have. Okay. Now, there's one other thing that you can consider is that from a project standpoint, you do have the ability to add a connector for Microsoft Planner. Think of Planner as a lightweight project management, task assignment tool. And with Planner, you can plug that right into your team, and you can have your task breakdown for your project team members right there built out in Planner so that they can see that. Teams also plugs into some other tools like that, like Trello and Asana, but the connectivity to Planner is a little more integrated than those third-party tools. Okay. I hope that's a great question, one that we get a lot, and so I hope that helped. If not, we could be more than happy to, have further conversation about that.
Jennifer, you're on mute.
Yep.
Of course I'm on mute. If I had a dime for every time I did that, I would be in TV. One of the things I was going to say is we've had that same question come across our desk pretty frequently, the business about how many teams do I create, what should I name them, what are these channels? And one of the associated issues with that is all of the files and conversations and things that get saved when you're creating teams and channels. So, so the takeaway for today is, guys, you know, I say take the advice that we're getting from these experts and just start out with just your whole group, you know, one team, and you guys are chatting back and forth and doing whatever you're doing. And then as you become more familiar with what it means to set up a team and then channels within the teams and then where all the stuff gets saved, then we can begin to move you along that continuum with whatever training or coaching or consultation with Centric or whatever. But the takeaway is know that that functionality is there, but you don't have to jump into it right to start with until you feel better about how all that stuff is structured and saved, because you save time down the line having to clean stuff up if you're not exactly sure, you know, how it's all structured and works.
That's a great point. Yes. Yes. Excellent.
Okay. Let's grab another question here. This is really interesting. Does Teams suffer from bombing like Zoom?
Okay, so I would love to answer that question, and because we get this question a lot right now, and the answer is no. There is Microsoft built Teams with a security first approach. We take a security first approach when we help our customers get started with Teams. And there are capabilities simply because Teams is not a free download that you can just start with. You actually have to have a Microsoft Office 365 tenant that is tied to your organization in order to use Teams. And there are, and which also means that you have to be an authenticated user to Office 365 in order to spin up a team, and only those people that you send an invite to are able to connect with a team. There's some additional security considerations that we would highly recommend if you're using Teams on mobile devices, things like mobile device protection. But Microsoft just because they get this question a lot, just a few days ago, I think it was on the 6th, they actually published how to use Teams securely in a remote work situation. We will provide that link so that you all can see it. But the one thing that you can be confident about is you're not going to get the same, I think they call it Zoom bombing or whatever it is. Yeah, experience with Teams that you're getting with that some people are experiencing with Zoom today.
Perfect. Thank you. We got another really interesting question. We've been throwing these terms around, so we should define. What's the difference between an org and a tenant?
Okay. Org and tenant, so that's probably just my fault for confusing you. I'll be frank about that. So org is just your organization. It has nothing to do with technology at all, right? And so it's the people within your organization that you would consider employees, okay? A tenant is when you go to buy Office 365 subscriptions from Microsoft, they reside within a tenant. So think of the tenant as the house that you're going to live in Office 365, and you get to decide who the members of your family are that reside in that house. Okay, so what we often find is that as you provision Office 365 and to create that tenant so you can use those licenses, you typically connect that to Active Directory or whatever your directory is, and that exposes all of those users in your organization to Office 365 then. Okay, I hope I saw that question, yeah, and I think I just caused confusion, so sorry about that. But I hope that helps.
I'm not sure that you did necessarily, but again, the takeaway is, sometimes, right, this is a lot of information to absorb in a short amount of time, but that's sort of the whole point of Aparo doing these websites. We're trying to sort of seed the field with this information and then say, guys, if it curls your hair, come back to us, you know, and we'll reconnect you with resources to help you figure this out and
That's
make
great.
the best decisions for you. Because we realize we can't, you know, we can only go so deep in an hour each day. So, but that's the whole purpose of having a PARO to lean on, and we're happy to help people with those questions.
Yep.
But I did want to go back to the call function. We had another interesting question about someone who uses the call function, and they said that they each switch on their video when they do it, but they can't see everyone else. And so they want to know, you know, how do we turn it on so we can all see each other at the same time?
Yep. TJ, you want to take that one, or you want me to take that one?
I'm curious about the answer. I've struggled with this myself, so I think.
Okay. Okay. So one of the biggest complaints Microsoft has gotten about as people start to use Teams more is that I can only see 4 people on the screen at one time. Right? With Zoom, I can see 49. Well, I don't know why you'd want to see 49, but okay. But you could only see 4. And so up until probably about a week from now, that is accurate. Starting about a week from now, Microsoft has released what many people are affectionately calling the Brady Bunch feature, where you're now going to be able to have a 3x3, so 9 people on the screen at one time. If anyone else, just like today, that's not part of that primary 4 today or primary 9 in the future, will be in a small icon on the bottom of the screen. You won't see their video, but you'll see that they are participating in the meeting. But also by the end of May, and I just, I'll share this anyhow, it'll be public soon. By the end of May, Microsoft will start rolling out an even further enhanced video capability that right now I'm hearing that that it's going to allow for 12 to 16 people, somewhere between 12 and 16, to be viewed on the screen at the same time. One of the restrictors there is just their mindfulness around how much bandwidth that requires. So what we've heard is, yeah, they could turn on 49 people at one time today, but the bandwidth that would require, especially on home networks, would be a little overwhelming. So they're making this step to 9 users, and then another by the end of April, and another step up to 12 or 16 users on the screen at one time by the end of May.
Wow, that's good news. I know that, you know, there's been a lot of discussion about the use of video for connecting with people in these remote times and how important it is to, you know, for that connection. So, you know, we know a lot of folks are using Zoom. We're doing it right here, right? And comparing the functionality between Teams and Zoom and so on and so forth. So that was a helpful explanation. I appreciate it. So, guys, we're approaching the top of the hour, and I want to make sure that I give folks another opportunity before we close down our session today to ask any additional questions or raise your hand. We will certainly be happy to help you out. And if you would like to just reach out to us after today, by all means, let a PARO help you out in any way we can. We're here to help you with O365 or Teams or what's this business about tenants and orgs and all that good stuff. We have a great tech team that can help you answer some of the questions that Joe was pointing out are good to know to have intact so you succeed with Teams. So reach out to us if you need help with that. Are there any other questions or comments? I just had a question come in. It says here, sometimes the video will freeze halfway through a meeting that I have, but I can still have a conversation. What is going on?
That's actually a very simple answer. It is actually fluctuations in your bandwidth is what's causing that. Teams is kind of sensitive to bandwidth fluctuations today. The good thing is that voice traffic is prioritized over video traffic, so that even if somebody's video freezes, they can still be part of the conversation that's going on. And one other thing that I'll throw out there too is from a Teams architecture perspective, screen sharing is different than video. So screen sharing, like we're doing in this presentation today, screen sharing is actually prioritized ahead of video also, so that because Microsoft considers the voice and the what's being presented as the key components of a meeting, not so much the video of actually being able to see somebody.
You know, and I'll say, at least internally with Aparo, it's not unusual for those of you who communicate with us frequently know that we're often starting our calls and whatnot with video not even turned on.
Yep.
Just because of bandwidth issues. So many people
Yep.
have kids at home and Zoom school and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, when it's appropriate to do so, kill off the video. Just go with audio or use a phone line to call it. You know, you guys who work with us frequently know we also have a conference bridge line, and we'll often tell you, call us on the phone. The computer audio is not working. So, so just a couple of tips to think about as you go forward with using Teams. So guys, we're at the top of the hour now, and what I'd like to do is just take another moment to thank you so much for your generosity. We appreciate you taking time to share your expertise and your experiences and offer us guidance. I so appreciate the resources that you've offered to share with us. For our listening audience, I'll make sure that we get those collated. Our awesome marketing folks will have that posted for you within 24 hours. And yeah, with that, I'd like to offer you gentlemen any closing remarks you might have.
Just really appreciate the opportunity to engage with you guys in our local community here in Charlotte. It's really a pleasure. So thank you for having us.
Yep. And all I'll say is just thank you for the opportunity. This was fun. I always enjoy answering questions because I think people learn more from those than oftentimes what we present. So so this was great, and we'll happy to share the resources we talked about today.
Excellent, excellent. Well, listen, I hope it's not too cold the rest of the day, John. We won't enjoy our spring-like weather too much.
I hope it warms up soon. Okay.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.